Good afternoon, everyone. Excellent. Was afternoon tea really good? I should have gone and hidden all of the food to sort of drum up audience numbers. That's where I've gone wrong. Welcome along to this session on effective DevOps for organizations. By way of introduction, my name's Anthony Borton. I'm Director of Field Services for APAC East at GitHub. But prior to that, I was a DevOps architect for a number of years with Microsoft. I worked very, very closely with the Azure DevOps engineering team, and as part of that, I transitioned over to GitHub after the acquisition. So I kind of have this wonderful dual personality, this sort of Microsoft side of things and the GitHub side of things, the best of both worlds, which is excellent. So I've been involved in software development in DevOps for many years. I go back to VB3. I should apologize for that now. Does anyone remember something called Visual Interdev? Anyone willing to put your hand up for that? Traditional ASP, we're all trying to forget. The therapy's paying off. That's exactly as we would hope. In my role with Microsoft, I was part of the DevOps Fast Track team, and what that meant was that I would go out to some of our largest customers around the world and help them with their DevOps transformation. Okay? And what that allowed me to see was a lot of different organizations claiming to do DevOps and very mixed results. So I thought, well, if we're not getting success from DevOps, why are we still doing it? That's got to be a good question, right? If something doesn't work, give it up. Well, I'll say that, in my opinion, DevOps is fine. It must be your fault. Oh, wait a minute. I can say that because hopefully you'll forgive me by the time you do the evaluations. It's the way that people implement DevOps that generally you find a lot of variation, and it's not easy. So in my talk today, I want to talk about some of the well-known visionaries that research and write about DevOps, and they've done amazing research across the globe to find out what works and what doesn't work. So I'm going to share one of their ideas. I'm going to talk about the 5 ideals from Gene Kim's book on the Unicorn Project. But I'm also then going to apply a lens to our own DevOps transformation at Microsoft. Now, that particular book came out around 2019. I should know the answer to that question. So 2019, I get the prize. That was quick and easy. I get a GitHub cup. So around 2019, the DevOps transformation that I'm talking about at Microsoft started a lot earlier than that. So that's what's in store for you for the next 55 minutes. If anyone wants to go rushing from the room now, I completely understand. So far, so good? All right. So you've probably seen this if you've attended any session from a Microsoft speaker. It tends to be the DevOps definition that resonates mostly with Microsoft folk. There's no one agreed upon definition of DevOps. If I take the front row of 4 people and ask for a definition of DevOps, I'm going to get 5 answers. Doesn't quite add up, does it? So what Donovan's set up here is that DevOps is the union of people, process, and technology to enable the continuous delivery of value to our end users. It's a pretty broad definition. Let me replay that. If you're delivering value to your end users, you're doing DevOps. Congratulations, we're done. No? All right. I want to dig into that a little bit further. You've all seen, I imagine, the infinity symbol. It takes many different forms. It still tends to be the infinity symbol. Different vendors, ourselves included, like to go in there and pay graphic artists, and they do all sorts of nice shading, and they put little logos all over it, but in essence, that's kind of what we're talking about here. DevOps isn't just CI/CD, a very common misconception. DevOps really needs to focus on right the way from ideation right through to production and post-production. And when you look at it that broadly, when you try and assess DevOps success, failure, and improvement, I really then tend to focus more on big picture thinkers. And that's what led me to some of the readings of Gene Kim, Dr. Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, just some of the people that you've probably all read if you're sitting in this room. Most organizations focus DevOps around that little spot there. What is that spot? That's CI/CD. Why do we go there first? Anyone want to guess? No guesses yet. You're feeling brave.
It gets the product to the customer.
It gets the product to the customer, so it's pretty important. It's also usually incredibly painful. So focusing a lens on where do we need help, that's always a prime candidate because we usually do it so poorly. So that makes sense. The problem is, once we solve some of this pain, once we've got build and release pipelines working, what next? In many cases, that's it. And we forget about the rest of the picture. So I want to look at the bigger picture there with you. I want to go back and consider some of the fundamentals, the day-to-day things that we do to achieve effective DevOps. So I like that big picture thinking, as I said earlier. It's nice to know that you've got people over there that can go and do Helm charts and do all of the wonderful little exciting things, and that's good. They're really important skills. But for an organizational DevOps talk, it's a step back. These were the three folks that I quoted. There's certainly a lot of good presenters out there. I had the pleasure of meeting Gene Kim on one of his tours pre-COVID in Brisbane, and that was really, really nice. So I'm going to talk about his 5 ideals. Who's read the Unicorn Project? Phoenix Project as well, 2 for 2. Accelerate, the trifecta. Okay, that's not too bad. That's really, really good. Okay, so now any hard questions, we know where to channel them. I love it. So the 5 ideals that Gene talks about. The first one, locality and simplicity. The next one there, focus, flow, and joy. Joy springs to mind when you talk about DevOps, or it should. The next one is improvement of daily work. The 4th, psychological safety. And the final one is customer focus. So I want to walk through those with you now for the remaining time. Talk about the importance of these things. Practically, what does it mean? And how can you apply those 5 ideals in your workplace? And I'm hoping that people in this audience would be at least practicing half of those. Maybe you're doing a whole lot more. Maybe you've got all 5 represented, which would just be wonderful for you. That's the kind of workplace that attracts people to want to join. So let's start with the first one, locality and simplicity. What this particular ideal talks about is ensuring that you can do your job without being restricted by internal governance and organizational inefficiencies. Okay? Some of the measures of that, these have been terms used broadly. The first is the bus factor. How many people need to be hit by a bus before everything stops and we can't deploy? The Phoenix Project people, you remember that bus factor was 1. You knock one person out and everything stops. That's a really bad idea. The other one there they talk about is the lunch factor, and that's been termed for quite a while. And the basic idea is how many people have I got to go and buy lunch for in order to get something done? It might be you, and you. That's excellent. Or do I have to buy lunch for this audience or all of the audience? Do I have to go and find the 50 people in my organization that I have to buy lunch for in order to get the product out? What do you think? Try scheduling 50 people's calendar to get a common lunch. Not an easy thing to do. The goal here is the idea of pizzas and pizza teams. So in a perfect world, the guidance is I should take out enough folk that I can feed with 1, possibly 2 pizzas, and that should be all I need to do in order to deliver some value. I don't have to go and talk to the change advisory board. I haven't got to go and play nice with the database team. I haven't got to go and campaign with a wide variety of people in order to get something done. How frustrating. And that's a smile. Is that a knowing smile of, hey, he's been to my workplace? No? All right. So you'll see that little icon in the top corner. That little blue icon with the Azure DevOps logo is there because these are little insights now that I'll share with you around that ideal and how we applied that at Microsoft in the Azure DevOps team. We talk about our DevOps transformation with Azure DevOps starting in 2010. That's when we had Sprint 1. Prior to that, we were doing great. We were building a giant monolith. We were striving for peak technical debt. That's a bad thing. And we were successful. That was also a bad thing. When things are working, you tend to forgive errors and mistakes. Shareholders are happy, money's coming in, pats on the back. You don't tend to be too analytical. Okay. That doesn't scale, that doesn't grow. So like many teams, many organizations, we had teams based on their skills. So we conveniently bundled all of the web developers, we bundled all the API team, we bundled all of the DBAs, etc. And those teams were based on function. Okay? That's exactly where Conway's Law came to bite us in the butt. So the idea of Conway's Law, organizations design systems that mirror their own communication structure. So if you're just one big group, big team, you end up with a monolith. If you're lots of independent, self-organizing teams, you end up with microservices at scale. There's a lot more we can talk about with that, but right here, we structured it based on the communication structure, and that really wasn't a good idea. This isn't revolutionary thinking. I'm hoping no one here still has those kind of teams. We wanted to move forward, and we wanted to strive for vertical teams. We knew we needed to change, but what does that look like? As I talk about this with customers, I'll sometimes hear that, oh yeah, but this is a Microsoft example. You're a big, really rich company, you just make the change. No, bigger companies are harder to change. All right? I am grateful for something. All of our CEOs have been engineers. That makes a difference, and I'm really glad of that. So, what did the change actually look like? Is anyone brave enough, or does anyone have teams like this still? Do we have testing team? Yeah. Developers, PMO, sometimes by another name. It should hopefully be becoming less and less common. But we had that, absolutely. So we went through the typical change, and this is a few years ago now. We got rid of the testers. That's great. No more bugs. Sold. We got rid of the label, as silly as that sounds. So we had other terms. So we had SDETs and SDEs, software development engineers in testing. We gave them all these fancy acronyms. But when it's all said and done, we moved the developers and what were the testers together. We took the labels away, and they were engineers. And that was great. We eliminated a silo. Okay. Sounds easy. Wasn't. We lost some staff. We lost talented staff that wanted to just be career testers and focus exclusively on QA. We looked at other locations within the organization for them, but we did lose some talent, and some of that talent went to competitors, I'm sure. So it was a painful change, but one that really decoupled us from that older siloed way of doing things. We then recognized another silo, and that silo is the ops people, our SREs. Okay, we just got another silo. Great. Well, we moved beyond that as well, and then we created that true cross-functional feature team. So this was really important. We ended up with a cross-functional feature team that had all of the skills, the knowledge, and here's the big one, the authority to create the features that our customers needed. Okay? The authority word's the hard one, okay? You can get people, you can tell them to sit in different places and things, but can management relinquish control and delegate authority to a team to let them do what needs to be done? Much harder. All right. The key lesson, we needed to empower small teams to be able to work independently so they could develop, test, and deliver value without needing to communicate and coordinate with other teams. I'll build on that idea in a moment. What did our teams look like? That's literally a real, that's in building 19, that's irrelevant to you, that particular room with the lime green wall. So this is a feature team. It's a physical team. So as you walk into the room, or into that area, you have little rooms on this side, little glass rooms on that side, a bigger room here, and then you have this semi-open plan. And if you stand up, every person you can see is involved in delivering the same value to customers. That's important. Okay? That sense of we're all in this together, we're all focused and aligned on a particular outcome. Cross-discipline, there's one engineering lead in there, and generally one product owner, product manager, not project manager. I'll revisit this in just a moment. Typically there's 10 to 12 engineers in that room. They are self-managing. They have clear charter and goals based around the OKRs for the team, which flow up to OKRs for the service they're involved in, and then flow up into Azure DevOps OKRs and then the corporate goals. So by flowing those up and down, you keep alignment right down to these individual feature team levels. I'll share with you that there were about 40 feature teams in Azure DevOps. Okay, that's a lot of teams that need to be pointed in the right direction. We kept those teams intact for about 12 to 18 months. And at the end of that time, we did an exercise, the post-it note exercise, for want of a better word. And that's self-forming teams, like the NFL draft. So you go into a room, you get your post-it notes, and you vote for the team you'd like to be in moving forward. That's empowering people. That's autonomy. If you want to change, you're working in Azure boards, you want to go and do something in Azure Artifacts, you put a post-it note up there. No HR, no interviews, none of those sorts of things. You know, you're an engineer and you can work in any of these teams. What it turned out was that about 80% of people chose to stay where they were, 20% then moved between teams. And that was great because it cross-pollinated the microculture of these various teams, and they brought different ideas and practices from team to team to team. But it also meant each individual had control of where they were going. And that's very, very important for staff retention and keeping staff happy. These teams owned their features in production, and they owned the deployment of those features. Let's have another look at exactly what that means. I want you to think about maybe the teams that you work in or in your organization. Think of some of your development teams. For example, we have a team and they're responsible for framing the hypothesis. We believe the customer wants this for these reasons. They are responsible for the specifications and design, the feature development, code reviews, automated tests. Okay, that sounds reasonable. I'm not feeling too bad yet. What else is the team responsible for? The team is responsible for the deployment pipelines. Config scripts, deployment management. Getting a bit burdensome now, isn't it? The team is also responsible for the secure design, for the security of it. They're responsible for the security audit and remediation. Now you're getting scared and worried. They're also responsible, it can't get much worse, can it? They're also responsible for production support and much more. I would expect some hands here. How many of you work in teams that have that level of ownership? One? Excellent. More than one? A little bit? Fantastic. If you're feeling brave, do you feel the weight of that? Is this a positive or negative in your experience? Positive? Positive? That's all right. Fantastic. You don't have to, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Would you like to share why you feel it's a negative?
Because at our peak, our dev team had 4 people that handled this on our shoulders.
I will acknowledge 4 people can't do that. Yeah, okay. For everyone else, it's fantastic to see that this was a positive because it was a huge positive for all of our teams. The ownership of all of that brought joy to their environment. They take pride. People take pride in the work they do. If you're delivering valuable work, you want to stand proud and say, yes, we delivered that. If there is a problem in production, tell me, because it's my code and I'm the best person to get it fixed. I want to get it fixed because I take ownership. So teams really, really liked that a lot. Okay? Far from a burden, it was a blessing. The next ideal, focus, flow, and joy. Exactly what you think about work when you wake up in the morning. Who's with me? It's a bit late in the afternoon. The sugar from the afternoon tea break hasn't kicked in quite yet. All right, so what this ideal talks about is being able to work efficiently and effectively without interruptions, bottlenecks, and waiting. Sounds good. Gene knows his stuff, doesn't he? So let's share something. When we started Team Foundation Server, we were using centralized version control, collective groan from the room. Visual Source Safe, I'm going to get a groan out of someone. Visual Source Safe, all those centralized version control systems and the lovely branching models that they helped us create. TFS 2010, great product. The beta was about a month late. Why? 246 feature branches, including some branches that have been out in the wilderness for a long time. 4 full-time talented engineers whose sole job was merging those branches, and it took months. I only hope they were paid millions of dollars. So, when you think about that branching model, what do you think? Straight away, joy. Yep. No. It was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. So, fortunately, those things are a thing of the past now. These days, the dominant pattern that we use is trunk-based development, and there's a really good reason why we do that. That's an alternative, and you never want to go there. The simple shift in providing joy to the team was ditch that model, move to a model, trunk-based development, that gave us flow of value, where we didn't sort of bottleneck and stop and start knocking on the glass panes to those engineers that were trying to merge code. Ugh, horribleness. Fortunately, that's the norm now. Another thing we did. All right, you're a bit sleepy. So everyone, hands up. Come on, you can do it. Work with me here. Keep your hands up if you love being interrupted when you're in the zone. No one's brave enough to challenge. All right, good. Exactly. No one likes being interrupted, 100%. Yet we have an interruption culture in the world today. We have addictions to our phones. What's happening? Who's pinging me? Those little addictive bings at our phone that lets the dopamine go, woo, look, someone loves me. My phone's very silent. So to deal with some of those issues and dramas, we set up a shield team. It's a simple thing, a simple concept. Anyone got shield teams? Yes. Loving it. So what we do in each of our feature teams, for each sprint, we get 2 of the team members, and those team members are the shield team. And they take on no feature development during that particular sprint. They put their feet up, no, not kidding. What they do is they look after live site. If there's a live site incident, they're the DRIs straight away. There's always a previous live site incident, LSI, that needs to be documented. There's always something to be done. There's always a new process to be improved or there's work for them, there's no question of it. But their job is to shield the rest of the team so the rest of the team can just be in that flow, that zone where they're just delivering value, because that's what brings them joy. Pretty simple task. Well, sorry, don't say it that way. Pretty simple concept. Pushing back on some of the interruptions, not always so simple. Every sprint, we rotate that around. And if possible, we always try and have a more senior and a more junior person. Far be it from this as a punishment, this is great because you get to see other aspects of the code, the things you are building and developing, and the team love it. We also have, remember I talked about this person here, the product owner, product manager, I'll call him for a minute. That person, they get to talk to customers directly, and they can go and call on someone from the Shield team. We want open communication so we can talk directly to our customers. So rather than tapping people on the shoulder all the time, we have designated people. We get the Shield team there. They're available for the calls. Excellent. It keeps the majority of the team in the zone. Okay? The other thing is, we talked about communication challenges. You've got one team talking to another team. If they're dependent on each other for things, then you've got to then do your scheduling, you've got to work out communication, you've got to do sequencing, sometimes deconflicting, all sorts of other interesting challenges. And then you want to scale, so you add another team and suddenly productivity goes down. And you add another team and you're getting more people and less productivity. And before you know it, your lead time for a feature has gone from 30 days to 150 days, but you've added staff. So communication can become a significant problem here. Of the 40 feature teams that I'm talking about at Azure DevOps, the PM takes care of a lot of that inter-team communication. They don't need to talk to 39 other teams. Typically, they'll talk to one or two adjacent teams. And we design that on purpose. If you had dependencies between them, you would never get any work ever done. I'm going to take a little sidebar just for a moment, because we're talking about joy and flow and focus. Did you see that? That was coordination even. So, in talking about joy, what makes me excited and joyful for the future? And it's a little bit of a, there you go. It's a little bit of a shameless plug. Something that I'm very excited about is GitHub Copilot. And why I think this is very relevant is feedback from users of Copilot. If you've never heard of it or seen it, Copilot is an AI-powered pair programming assistant. Look at the feedback specifically from some of the early people using this tool. More in the flow, less frustrated when coding, more fulfilled with my job, focus on more satisfying work, and less mental effort on repetitive tasks. If you're a developer, why wouldn't you want some of that? And if Copilot can write up to 40% of the code in new applications, that's the 40% that doesn't bring you joy, then this is potentially huge. There's a quote here that I'll share with you. I have to think less. Interesting opening. And when I have to think, it's the fun stuff. It sets off a little spark that makes coding more fun and more efficient. But we're not metric driven, we're emotion driven. Wow. I think that's very, very powerful. If you'd like to know a little bit more about that, Mish, wave your hands. Lack of enthusiasm there from Michelle. Mish has got a session straight after this one upstairs called GitHub Like a Boss, where she's going to talk about that and many other different things. So if that is of interest to you and you haven't selected a session for the next slot, there's something to consider. The third ideal, getting back to Gene's 5 ideals, the third one is an improvement of daily work. What that one's about is introspecting on how you and your team operates and improving the things that slow you down or make your job hard. I'm going to start with a quote from a character you'll probably recognize. It's Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. Let me read this quote to you. There cannot be a more important thing for an engineer, for a product team, than to work on the systems that drive our productivity. So I would, any day of the week, trade off features for our own productivity. I want our best engineers to work on our engineering systems so that we can later on come back and build all of the new concepts we want. I'm going to highlight a little spot there. From the top of our organization, someone saying that we will choose our own productivity over a feature. It doesn't get much clearer than that. But I see that very infrequently. In many organizations, it's all about the feature. Got to get the feature out, got to get the feature out. That's what customers love us for. Slowing down, focusing on your developer productivity, a little bit of effort there means features come much, much faster. I took the slide out of the deck because it can be misleading. But what it showed is that the Azure DevOps team went from delivering about 22 features a year to delivering 320 features a year over about a 6-year period. And it was basically the curve. And that's with the same number of people and the same definition of feature. And we did that by removing all of the blockers, all of the challenges, all the processes that didn't actually add value to delivering software. And some of the changes, the reorganization of teams and so forth, there were a lot of them to achieve that. So, in terms of measuring our improvement to daily work, one of the techniques that we adopted was we created engineering scorecards. Now, the engineering scorecard showed information for all 40 teams on a single pane of glass. And we made the usual mistakes everyone makes when they start DevOps. DevOps is about metrics. Therefore, if you can measure it, it's a metric. And you choose all the worst metrics because they're easy to measure. Does that resonate with anyone? Yeah. Number of lines of code written, yay, oh my God. So, it was really, really hard to get a new metric put up here. You've got to convince a lot of people because most metrics have unintended consequences, including simple consequences like they can be easily gamed. If they can be gamed, then that's a waste of time and effort. What we found is, and I won't do it because I'm not feeling brave today, but I'll often actually literally go to that live site and show you what it looks like. One day that'll burn me, I'm sure. What it shows you is there'll be some red up there, but in almost every case, it'll be red less than 1 day. Because if something goes red, it doesn't stay red. There's pride that our teams have. No one wants to be on the board with a team that has all the red things. No one has to go and punish them. It's, teams love this fast feedback. Some of the metrics there, I won't read them all to you. Probably I'll call out 2 of them. The first one I really like. LSI is a live site incident. The fact that it sits here and it's number 1 says a lot about what our leadership says is important for Azure DevOps. As a SaaS product used by millions of customers around the world, we don't want live site incidents. That's the worst thing you can do. So if and when an LSI happens, you have to document it. We have the bridges, all those sorts of things. That's for another day, another talk. But you can't close the LSI until you've written LSI repair items. LSI repair items are work items that document all of the engineering, whatever needs to be done, so that that incident can never impact a customer again. Sometimes it's, hey, we sit on SQL Azure, we need to upscale that and spend more money on COGS. That's just an example. So when these LSIs are created, you get 2 sprints to complete that work before you get a stale LSI at the top. And you get 1, and that goes red. That's how important that is. There's another one there you might see, bugs per developer, bugs per engineer, I mean. You'll see that on the right-hand side, it shows 5 and it's green. Our bug cap happens to be 5. So the minute we get 6 bugs per engineer on the team, that goes red. That's a sign that we're accruing technical debt and you need to pay that down before you can take on any new feature work. So these metrics are very selectively chosen. They're actionable. The minute one of those goes red, it's very, very clear what the team needs to do. Okay? The next one, in terms of daily work, another common challenge that teams will face is how do you know if you broke something? So we had this wonderful scenario where we had things called TRAs. There's NAS, FARs, and TRAs, and it's all very interesting. They're all Microsoft terms, don't worry about them. What's significant are the orange pillars. These are automated functional tests that are the most expensive to write, the slowest to run, and the least reliable. So what did we do? We went all in. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? We actually got 80% of tests passing. What did we do? We shipped it. Let that sink in for a second. 80% of your tests are passing, so you ship code. Because the other 20% of tests are flaky tests, which most of them were, maybe not all of them. So we changed that. I'm just going to jump ahead for a second. We came up with this idea, L0, 1, 2, 3. They're just things we created. And the idea is that an L0 is a broad class of fast in-memory unit test with no external dependencies, and you must write these. If you must have external dependencies, things like SQL, they're L1s, and then we can move up to L2s and 3s, which are functional tests, but at a very diminishing scale. This is a shift left on security. You've heard the term before, or maybe invert the test pyramid. This was a monumental change. Over a period of about 2.5 years, and I haven't got that on the chart there, we went from no L0 tests to about 84,000 L0 unit tests. Every time a developer would commit code into Azure DevOps, we would trigger a workflow that would go and run 84,000 or 86,000 unit tests. And we did that about 260 times a day. Okay? That's an extraordinary lot of testing. It was starting to take more time, and we sort of did all sorts of things to optimize that. We then used test impact analysis, and we determined which tests could possibly have been impacted by the change in that coding path. So then we could make very selective, accurate choices, not to run 80,000 odd tests, but sometimes run 2,000 or 5,000, depending on exactly the code that changed. That was a huge win. The other win was we went from committing code and waiting 2 days to get an answer to getting a result back in about 24 minutes. Okay, that's huge. You check something in and you cross your fingers for 2 days, you get cramps. It's really hard. So now 23 minutes, that's okay. You can still use your mouse with your other hand. So this is something else I'll show you in terms of improving our daily work. The not ideal here is that no one cares if someone breaks the build or checks in code that breaks tests. The ideal here is that when someone breaks our build or tests, fixing it becomes the single most important thing at the time. This is great because it's all green, but there are definitely some red spots up there. What is telling here is you never see 2 reds side by side. So across all of those different service builds, and this is the time axis across the top, if a build breaks, it's green the very next build. Okay? That's evidence that our processes are working there, that the culture is, it goes red, nothing else matters, get it fixed. So we keep our code in a constantly deployable fashion. Second last, psychological safety. All right, so psychological safety is cultivating an internal environment where it's okay and even good to make mistakes. And it's okay to improve the status quo. That second part's actually quite relevant too. Now, It's safe to make mistakes. Uh-oh, he's talking about feelings again. Fear not, these feelings are backed up by very smart people. You look at some of the State of DevOps report, you look at the work that Nicole Forsgren, that Gene Kim put into these things, and this is very, very much backed up. You go back to other reports on organizational culture and so forth, and the evidence stacks up incredibly well. Teams that feel safe will always outperform other teams. Absolutely always. And there is mountains of evidence to prove and back this up. At Microsoft, we looked at this idea of adopting a growth mindset. And what did that look like? We adopted a mindset of continually improving versus trying to prove our intelligence. There was a time where our culture was, hey, we have to know everything. And as someone working at Microsoft, when you stood on stage, you basically were expected to know everything. And it's a fallacy. No one knows everything. So we changed that culture and mindset to, you don't have to know everything, but let's learn about this together. And that's how we approach customers. Another thing about that growth mindset is we value the collective intelligence more than just lone genius. Okay? That comes back to the bus factor as well. The third point there, failure breeds success versus failure is not an option. Very few successful entrepreneurs out there are successful with their first venture. You've got to fail and fail and fail, and every time you learn more, and that's what breeds success. Another quote there, since I'm giving quotes from Satya at the moment, we will be insatiable in our desire to learn from the outside and bring that knowledge into Microsoft, while still innovating to surprise and delight our users. What are some practical tips for psychological safety? What does that really look like? The first is blameless retrospectives. Not thinly veiled, pretend blameless, but real blameless. You know, the confidence to say, I did that, and it broke, and we had an outage, but I've learnt this, and this is what we can all do. And do that safely. If you're blamed for every misstep and every mistake, what does that do? It means you never step out of your comfort zone. You never innovate. You never try something new. You sit there safely in the status quo and stagnate. Because if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. Okay? True blameless retrospectives. We have introspection sessions. And what that's focused on is that we need to look at how things are working. And even if they are working and working well, what can we change? The idea that we can always do something better. Not a meeting that says, hey, everything's good, back to work. Try something every single time. Try something new, try to innovate. Focus on improving your daily work. I've been talking about that a little bit at the moment. And the last one is trust and ownership. And the flip side of trust is ownership. If you were responsible for putting that code into production, you should own that code. Okay, that's really important. Getting to our last ideal then, customer focus. It sounds rather easy. Oh yeah, we're customer focused. You can be customer focused and then you can step that up to customer obsessed. And there's a big difference there. So with customer focus, giving you an overarching goal for software to be successful, it must be valuable to customers and make them happy. Sounds like a worthwhile pursuit. There's a quote there, there's no better marketing strategy than independent customer praise. If you're doing a good job and your customers love it, they're going to tell other people. And you can't buy that. That's amazing. Talk to any good marketing person out there. Don't get in the way of feedback. So our feature teams can talk directly to customers and regularly do. Don't put multiple layers. You've got to talk to these people and then they talk there. Don't have all of those filters that get in the way of good communication. Even if it's bad communication, if it's for my product in my team, I need to hear it. Do what your customers need, not necessarily what they say. Okay? That's a hard one sometimes. They might tell you one thing, but you ask questions, you probe, you look at it, and you think, well, that's not quite what you want. Have the conversation and don't be scared to offer guidance and push back a little bit. How am I going? Yep, 15. Oh, I can tell you a quick story. So, anyone used Azure DevOps? Has anyone heard of team rooms? Not teams, different thing, team rooms. It was an interesting thing, and the reason no one's got their hand up is probably twofold, including the fact it doesn't exist. But it did. Going and talking to our customers, a common recurring theme was, we want enterprise social. And our question was, what's that? What is enterprise social? Oh, but we want it in Visual Studio. Didn't answer the question. And it turns out it was effectively, they wanted to be able to have a chat thing built in. They wanted to see who was present, who wasn't present. They wanted to make communication easy for Scrum teams. So, that piece of cake, we've got Yammer and Slack, and also, don't say Slack. We've got all these other products that are our products, of course, first. How about those? And the customers went, no, we need it built in. So we went away and we architected it and we put all the work in and we shipped something called Team Rooms. And we watched the telemetry show usage, woohoo! And it died. Hello? And it was still dead. And we went to our customers and said, hey, what did we do wrong? And you know what they said? Oh, it's great. No one was using it. We had the evidence to show that. So we went back to the drawing board. We thought, we've mucked this up. In TFS 2012, we're going to do better. So we tried to figure out what doing better was, and we thought maybe they can't find it. So we put it on the little page, the web page that appears when you open Visual Studio for the first time. We'll tell them about it. Yes, and we launched it and it went like that. You know what happened next, don't you? It died. We persevered for 3 iterations of the product. And our customers kept telling us, this is great, and then kept not using it. So Brian Harry got up there and said, okay, we're shutting it down. And no one cared because no one was using it. But it was a great example of customers telling you one thing, but you've got the telemetry to back that up to show literally it was not being used. So we're investing engineering time, testing time. We're putting effort into something that's not being used. The opportunity cost is we could be building the next big thing that everyone wants to use. So while it just says, what do your customers need? The real question there is sometimes they don't know themselves. We make extensive use of feature flags and private previews. Let customers see things early. Particularly those most enthusiastic and often most vocal customers, they can go and turn features on and start giving you feedback to validate or invalidate the hypotheses that you use to create that particular feature. The sooner you can start that learning, the better it is. The last one there, hypothesis-driven development. Effective monitoring of the end goal is the most important thing here. You will not get things exactly right the first time. Iterate and learn, and don't be afraid to be wrong. Okay? That's quite a wise thing. We make a lot of use of that. As a definition of done, this was another thing that I think I saw this as part of the definition of done for the first time when I joined Microsoft. I have seen this used in other teams now, which is great. And basically, the definition of done includes the statement that products are live in production and collecting feedback. Remember who's done Scrum courses? That whole debate of what a definition of done is and what it should include. Okay? I checked the code in done. That's got to be more than that. I checked the code in and the tests work, yay. No, got to be more than that. So a definition of done can include things like it is live in production and we're collecting telemetry to teach us about the usage, subject to all of the appropriate privacy laws and data collection. So that's not an easy thing to get right. Okay? So selective collection of that data with opt-in. Take a zero-distance approach to your customers. So what we talk about here is within the product, we made it really, really easy for our users to give us feedback. Directly within the product, they could go up there and click a button and give us feedback. That feedback is then automatically put into a public forum. Okay? Yes, public forum. The only filtering we did was profanities. Okay? You're not there to hide the tough questions. We then took that information and we created an issue and put the issue on the backlog. So we literally got feedback from the product straight into the product backlog, and it was evaluated, assessed, and actioned as deemed appropriate. We also constantly asked customers to provide feedback and scores. We had a feedback service calculate the NPS score, and we used that Net Promoter Score to keep track of the product. It was part of our OKRs. We had to achieve certain levels of customer satisfaction there. We also took it a little bit further, and for our 50 largest customers, we assigned champions. So senior people in the product team were assigned to those biggest customers, and they went and worked with those customers. There was a direct line of communication. These are some big energy companies in there. There's some big financial companies in there, big consulting companies in there. So we would literally have senior people on speed dial. They'd often go into their offices and just sit there and talk and chat to find out how are they really perceiving our product, what are their pain points, what are their challenges. So that was sort of taking it to the next level in terms of customer obsession. So that's the 5 ideals and how we've applied some of those ideals through a team that I'm quite familiar with. DevOps transformations need to be truly transformative. I gave you the example before. We went from approximately 22 to about 340 features every month over about a probably 7-year period of time. So DevOps doesn't give immediate success. It's a long game. There's no end state. Don't say that when you're trying to get funding approval. DevOps is just that constant journey of improvement. But when you can back that up over time with evidence to show how much more value you are giving your customers, then that's a lot easier sell. Well, I hope that's been informative for you this afternoon. I think I've got about 8 minutes left, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm happy to take any questions from you. If you want to duck out, or when you finish with the questions, we've got some GitHub swag over there. Lots of stickers there. So when you go outside and you provide your feedback, don't throw the sticker in the box. Make sure you get the cards. All right? So of those 5 ideals, no, I can't even think of it. Stu is my guest, Stu. Stu's going to think of a question that we can ask to give away a piece of GitHub swag. Okay, Stu's put on the spot and he's just cursing me mentally. He's thinking, oh, payback's going to hurt that guy on stage.
Should you build a DevOps team?
All right.
So the question I put together was, should you build a DevOps team? And I'm not sure you really gave the answer to that, but it's the same reason that you don't have an SRE team, you don't have a test
Well,
team.
don't give them the answer. All right, see, that's the payback. Payback comes quickly in our organization. I put him on the spot and then he gives you a question and an answer, invalidating the premise completely. Do you reckon we can get microphone guy? Deep, would you like to ask the audience a question?
Ask the audience a question
Yeah,
about DevOps?
about DevOps? This man is, if you can ask him about DevOps if you like, or you can just, okay, I'll help you out here.
Please.
And I'm going to make this fair for everyone. You don't have to be a DevOps guru. Who's going to call out and tell me what room number we're in? Okay, where'd the 3 come from? It was over there somewhere deep. I'm going to give you the job. Congratulations, you got a microphone.
Does this work at home?
Deep, Can you do the honours and give the gentleman this for me? And you can have your microphone back too.
Can I ask?
A question as well.
I'm going to keep the microphone.
All right. Now, I did that because I was almost always going to forget that. A question up the back, sir. Microphone.
What do you reckon the best number of people in an engineering team? You mentioned about 10 to 12 in your slides. Do you think that's the best number of people in a team, or less or more?
We found that to be a good number for our teams. You heard from someone earlier that said 4 was a disaster. You can't look after that sphere of responsibility with so few people. So for us, 10 to 12 seems to be a comfortable spot when you look at the responsibilities that they have. And that gives us enough diversity in skills so the team can be fairly autonomous and independent. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Disagree or agree?
Yeah, amazing presentation. So the other thing that I wanted to ask is the diagram that you showed for vertical teams.
The diagram I showed for?
Vertical teams.
Yes.
Yeah. So in an industry where you might have a lot of attrition when a lot of developers leave. So not only do the developers leave, but a node in that knowledge graph also leaves. So you need to replace that with a node which is equally valuable, or it might take a longer time for that new node to attain that much amount of knowledge. The historical context goes away, the specific skill goes away.
Yes.
How do you deal with that?
I don't know. I've never had anyone leave my teams. It's also a complete lie. All right, so I guess one of the things that you've got to have is, it gets back to that bus factor. You can't have all of the skills around a particular thing reside with an individual. It commonly happens, of course, but you've got to have a mindset and culture across that team of cross-skilling. I gave the example of a Shield team and said we always try and get a more senior and a more junior, so that everything they do, there is that cross-pollination of knowledge going. And I think a smart team in a retrospective will identify and will know that, hey, you know what, Bob's the only SQL person. That's a bit of a risk. And try and deal with that before, staff retention does become a challenge. We're an incredibly mobile, society, not just IT. So yes, people on average spend less than 2 years in a role now. So you must plan for that, and you must plan. I think we've just moved over to a continuous recruitment model. That's a sign of the times that we're in. Where'd the microphone go? Sir.
Hi. On topic of the vertical teams and the horizontal teams, and you've mentioned that 10 to 12 seems to be the best sort of team size.
Yes.
I'm from a smaller company where I have one designer, I'm one of 3 front-end devs, there's 3 back-end devs and 3 testers, and there's only 6 of us that contribute to code. How do we take the stuff you've said today and apply it to a much smaller team? It'd feel like to get that verticality feels like almost insurmountable to try and... Our teams are very focused on their specific code, but how would you go about with a smaller team to get the best out of the advice you've given?
Sure. So firstly, I don't know that I would focus on that as my first problem or pain point. What you'll probably find is start adopting some of those practices. Those practices will scale down. It'll be a little harder, but if you set up an environment where you have a focus on developer productivity before features, that takes investment from your leadership, by the way. Yes, I know. Start focusing on that. A day spent, investing in developer productivity today, if that saves every developer an hour a week, the payback happens incredibly quickly. You've got to convince them of that. And then once that starts happening, you'll find that you will attract more talent, you'll be showing more value, you'll be appreciated by leadership a little bit more, and maybe that leads to the team growing. The other thing is you talked about being cross-functional. It's hard to be cross-functional in a very small team, but if there is a function deficit there, unless someone wants to go and pick it up in their own time, your only choice there is to try and justify the headcount and and grow the team. Sorry, I don't know if that's a particularly excellent answer, but it's the best I've got for you today. I've probably got time for one quick question.
Back into the topic of smaller teams, when you are in that situation, whether it's a startup or a small business, and you do have a smaller headcount of engineers, how do you still best implement DevOps? Or how would you prioritize these best practices?
So I'm going to give you a reasonably generic answer, and it's an answer I feel is good, and that is DevOps is about finding a pain point. So even in a small team, what is causing the most pain and the most friction? Try and make an incremental improvement to just that. That's the idea that scales in DevOps. So is it the release that's causing a problem? Is it testing that's causing a problem? As a small team, try and figure out where most of the pain is and try and solve for that pain. And then iterate, find the next piece of pain, and then just build and grow on that kind of, use that as a seed to grow your DevOps within the small team. All right, thank you very much. I think Deep's about to kick me out here, so enjoy the rest of your afternoon and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thanks so much, everyone.